Hey everybody, welcome back to another night of live coding. Tonight we're going to be checking out Vue.js. In a couple previous streams we looked at Angular and we looked at React. And we did some React Native, and we did a couple nights of React. And React and Angular are front-end frameworks for building HTML, CSS, and JavaScript front-ends. And Vue.js is another alternative that competes with React and Vue.js. I'm sorry, with React and Angular. So, I recently found out that Vue.js is actually now the second most starred repo on GitHub. It just surpassed Bootstrap, Twitter's Bootstrap, CSS and HTML framework. And so React is Facebook's front-end framework and Angular is Google's front-end framework. And Vue.js was started by this guy Evan You, and I think he came from Google. And it's supposed to be kind of a combination of the good things from React and the good things from Angular wrapped up in one and kept relatively simple. And so it's the only one we haven't checked out, and I thought I'd just go through it, give it a rundown, figure out what it's all about, figure out how I like it compared to React and Angular. And so what I thought about React and Angular was that React was basically just a library, and it didn't have a router, it didn't have state management, you had to add those on, whereas Angular had all kinds of stuff in the box. Angular comes with its own HTTP client. It's got, what else? It's got animation, it's got the routing, it's got the state management, the dependency injection, the unit testing. It's got all kinds of stuff in the box. And I like that. I liked Angular actually. I liked it more than React in that regard. And the reason, no, let's not see that. So the reason I like having all the stuff in the box, or at least having it related, is because then if you want to look for help or support, or you're looking for other developers, then you know that all those things work together, and you're going to find help for all of it together, and they all are going to be in sync. Whereas the other ones, someone might know this, that, and the other thing, and this guy knows that one with React and Redux, and this guy uses MobX, and this guy uses a different router, and it's a little more haphazard, and you're left guessing with your architecture, like, did I make a good choice? Would the other one have been better? And I kind of like the opinionated stuff. So, Vue.js, let's get started. Enough about my overview. So yeah, what is it and why? That's kind of the gist of it. And just from kind of browsing the documentation, there's a couple things that look like it stands out really nice about Vue.js. One is it looks more compact than Angular. Angular has lots of sprawling files and verbose syntax, and this looks like it's a little more neatly organized. But it comes with a router and a state management library, which React doesn't. As far as I know, they're not like in the same package. So let's get going. Let's start with installation. Let me make this bigger. There we go. So there's a CDN. Okay, for prototyping and learning, you can just include it right in your HTML file. That's nice. So I guess there's really not much to the installation. You're literally just importing the script. So why don't we get started by making a directory? Why don't we Vue example, and then we'll code. We'll use VS Code for this, at least right now. We'll make a new file called index.html. So we're gonna need some HTML boilerplate, a head and a body. And the script, you know, I'm not sure whether people still put it at the bottom of the body or up in the head. Okay, or use NPM. The recommended method is to use NPM. NPM is the recommended installation method. Oh, and John Kane says Vue has a really nice CLI. Okay, let's do that then. So, let me pop open the terminal here, and I'll say npm install, oh, was it Vue? Okay, npm install Vue, and I'll let that run. Then it's Vue also provides accompanying tools for authoring single file components. I would say it pairs nicely with module bundlers like Webpack or Browserify. Oh, thanks, John. Yeah. I guess they still do this. I mean, the whole reason that you would put the script at the bottom was to guarantee things ran after the page loaded. But the proper way to write scripts is to set a callback and say, if the page isn't loaded, set an event listener for when the page is loaded and then run. So theoretically, it shouldn't. I mean, I guess the other argument is that it loads the rest of the page before it hits your script. But if your script is actually needed to render the page, you're going to have to wait for the script to load anyway, right? So would you not want to put it in the head properly? Let's see what the CLI thing does. So John Kane says at Vue/CLI. Let's see if that installs something in addition here. Yeah, Vue provides an official CLI for quickly scaffolding ambitious single-page applications. It only takes a few minutes. Okay, watch a video. No. In the dist folder of the npm package, you'll find many different builds of Vue.js. Here's an overview. Oh, I guess it will package the one I need. I don't need to worry about that. Okay, so that one installed too. So let's see, is it just Vue? Oh, let's see. I think I need to add the node to my path. Oops, I want to delete to the end of the line. So I also want to add, what is it? /node modules /.bin. Okay, what is the program called? I guess it'll tell me in a second. What? I guess I need to go click on the page here. Vue CLI. Oh, I guess I didn't install it globally, which is why I can't find it in the... Oh, thanks, John Kane. You're saying the other Vue is for Vue version 2. Okay. So, I guess, is version 2... Is that, like, still in development and in beta? Or what's up with version 2? I'll have to check that out in a minute. Well, hold on. So... Vue.js GitHub. If we go to the official GitHub, what version is this? It says release 2.6. That's the master branch. 2.6. Okay, so there it is. It's just Vue. So what I'm going to do is quickly make an alias. I'm just going to say v equals that. So at least I can run it from my root here. So what do we have here? Create, add, invoke, inspect, serve, build, UI, init, config, upgrade, info. Okay, so I'm probably interested in init. Generate a project from a remote template. No, maybe. If I have a template, I'm probably more interested in create. Create a new project. Okay, ads for plugins. Inspect. So what is UI? Start and open Vue CLI UI. What is that one? Starting a GUI. Oh, fancy that. Oh, look at that. That's actually pretty neat. So, it didn't... Hold on a second. Okay, so if we go to create, I guess this is my folder, so let's say create a new project. Project folder, we'll call this will be our hello world. We're just going to toy around in this one. Package manager, let's go with yarn. Overwrite, it doesn't exist, but that's fine. Initialize git, yes. Initial base commit. Alright. This, I can't complain about this. A preset is an association. Oh. I'm gonna go with manually, just so I can review this because it's my first time. Babel, TypeScript. Okay, so here's something I'm not positive about. I'm pretty sure that if I use TypeScript, then I don't need Babel, because TypeScript automatically compiles down and does what Babel does. Progressive web app support. No, I'm going to skip that for now. Router? Yeah, let's add the router. And Vuex, that is the state. Okay, so it's got the router and the state management. CSS preprocessors, yes, I want to use SCSS. Linter and formatter, yeah, let's go practice. Unit testing, that's something I'm really bad at with the front end, so I'm going to add it anyway though. Add an end-to-end testing solution, yeah, let's throw in the kitchen sink. And no, let's just use the base JSON, package JSON. Oh, yeah, let me make this bigger for you all. Use class style component syntax. Use the at component. Yeah, that's the default. Let's stick with that. Oh, here it says use Babel alongside TypeScript for auto-detected polyfills. No. I'm gonna say no. Use history mode for router. By using the HTML5 history API, the URLs don't need the hash character anymore. Oh yes, I do want to do that. Requires proper server setup. Yeah, that's okay. Pick a SCSS, please. With Dart Sass or Node Sass? I don't really care. Oh wait. Yeah, they're both the same. SCSS. Pick a linter. Oh. Let's use TSLint since I'm using TypeScript. Pick additional lint on save, that's fine. Pick a unit testing solution. Oh, I don't really know. I'll go with the one. Instead of using two things, I'll use the one. We'll go with the Selenium based one. Preset name? Oh, we'll call this kitchen sink. You know, John Kane says Node Sass. Yeah, I think I want to do a stream coming up soon on Dart and Flutter. There's some hype rising up about that. They're calling it the React Native killer, but if Vue.js is nice, there's a native script. And native script lets you basically do React Native stuff, but with Angular and Vue, or just kind of vanilla JavaScript and TypeScript. So it essentially gives you exactly the same widgets that React Native does. So this is kind of nice. The Dart language is a compiled language. It's just another thing to learn, but oh, it's serving now? Okay, let's get out of full screen. Is it serving? Where? It should tell me, it'd be nice if it told me where it was serving. Uh-oh. I can't Control-C out of it? What's going on? You're dead. What? I was supposed to kill it. Oh, I have to hit the trash can. Kill terminal. Yeah, it really did, like, freeze up. Look. My finger is stuck. Oh yeah, I missed Ryan Wallace's message. It says, love the channel and streams. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that. John Kane says, Vue is the only framework I use. React is overly complicated, and I never really gave Angular a chance. Close. I found React to be relatively straightforward. I did find it a little... the big thing there was that you pass properties down to the children, and you use callbacks to send things up the chain. So yeah, there's a whole design pattern and everything that was associated with that. I liked Angular a lot, and I do. I'm using it right now to build something, and I like it. But I wanted to give Vue a shot because it's been nagging me. I've been curious just to see how good it is and what it's like. So where were we? Yarn serve. Am I in the right project? Oh, it never made the page. Oh wait, it made it here? No, that's mine. That's the one I made. Hold on. Let's try it again. So let's try using the command line this time. Oh no, I lost my alias too. Node modules. Node modules.bin view create hello world. Invalid project name. Name can no longer contain capital letters. Alright. Oh, nice. And it saved my... It still saved my pre-save. Good. Use yarn. Well, we've got at least one Vue fan in the audience. Which, hey, I'm not gonna complain. You can point out all the things I'm doing wrong. So a couple use cases that I do see for Vue would be like I'm working on the bug bounty browser extension, and right now the browser extension is just vanilla HTML and CSS, and I think I'm using a little bit of jQuery. So it'd be nice to drop in Vue without having all of Angular stuff in there. Alright, now it's running. Here we go. Oh no, my IP address. You guys can all see my IP address now. Alright, welcome to your Vue.js plus TypeScript app. For a guide and recipe on how to configure customize this app, check out the Vue CLI documentation. Installed plugins: TypeScript, Unit.jest, End-to-End, Nightwatch. Essential links: core docs, forum, community chat, Twitter news. Hey, John, I wasn't saying it was a bad thing. One of the things that I really like about doing the streaming is the help that I get from people. Because a lot of times I am just learning something new, like I am right now, and I'm learning something that I've never used before, and having someone experienced give me pointers and tell me, you know, if I am doing something wrong or anything. It's awesome. It makes streaming really beneficial for myself because I learn a lot of things from the audience and the chatters. Okay, so those are just links to the GitHubs and this. Alright, let's close out all these tabs and go back. Okay, so yeah, Vue CLI documentation. Get started. And so how do I check the version? I guess I'll open VS Code here in this directory now. In our package.json, it says we've got Vue 2.6. Okay. 2.6. Vue router and Vuex 3. Some dependencies. Okay. Nothing too out of the ordinary there. Okay, so we've got our type spec, or our TypeScript unit tests. And the end-to-end tests. I've never really messed with the Nightwatch Selenium end-to-end testing, but that's something I've been meaning to get more into. John Kane, do you do unit testing or end-to-end testing with your Vue code? That's something that... So the idea of unit testing is not very difficult or complex for me, and I've written lots of unit tests in an application where the framework was like already in place. The problem that I have with unit tests is just about everything I do touches something external, and I have to mock up everything. And so it's trying to mock up everything that makes it really difficult for me. Or the part that's very challenging. Like, how do you mock up OAuth 2, like an OAuth 2 social login script? Like, how much do you mock out and how much do you test? Like, I haven't quite worked out all those details. Okay, so Vue CLI is a full system for rapid Vue.js development, providing interactive project scaffolding, zero config prototyping, runtime dependency, yada yada yada. Let's get going. Basics, instant prototyping, creating a project. Okay, yeah, so we did that. We already created the project. Okay, we did that. So what's next? Okay, there's not much there. So I guess we just need to check out the Vue.js official documentation again. So we're going back to Learn, and there's Guide, API, Style Guide, Examples, and Cookbook. So let's start with, I guess, the guide. And so, okay, this is where we were earlier. Okay, so yeah, I took a little detour from the installation. Okay, so we were at the installation step up here, right? Okay, so it should have generated a page for us. Here's our index.html. And it put the script... Wait, where did it put the script? There is no... Oh, I guess I have to build it, right? So... Shoot. Do I do a yarn build? Yeah, there we go. Vue CLI service build. I want to see what the build... Where they put the script import. So John says, you're going to want to install Vetter. Is that like a linter for Vue? And says, I've tried test-driven development, but it's not really my thing. Jest is really good for mocking stuff and has good docs. Oh, I see. Vetter is a VS Code plugin. Here it is. Oh, let's turn on some word wrap. Yeah, it looks like they stick it in at the bottom of the body. I was just curious, like, after all these years, is that method still the prescribed way? See, I wonder if it's really necessary. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. Better. So actually what I want to use is WebStorm. Now that we got like a project going and we need the integrations and stuff, I'm going WebStorm. All the way. I'm definitely... When you need project integration, and it's more than just like a quick index.html file that I was working with before, that's totally my preference. So I'm going to exit out of here. WebStorm. Let's open View examples, Hello World. This window. Here we go. Okay, so let's take a look. Source. App.view looks that there's a main.ts and an app.view. Those look like the primary ones. Apply code style from tslint. Alright, and let's set the node interpreter. Okay, should be good now. So, main.ts. It's got some imports, import view, import app, I guess that's my app there, app.view, router, and store. Oh, and these are local too. Okay, so this is, I guess, what was generated because I chose to add the router. Oh, and very nice. It even gives me a couple routes to start working with. That helps a lot. Okay, and we got a home and about. So what's in store? This must be our state. Yeah. So I kind of briefly browsed the docs there, and they've got the actual state, but in order to access the state, you can't just, they're not public variables like in other classes. You have to access it through a getter and a setter, and that's what these mutations do. They basically track every change that has been made to the state over time, and you can even go back. And the actions are the getters and the setters for the state. That's my understanding of how it's basically like a global state. And maybe John Kane can correct me here, but that's my understanding of the Vuex state store at this time, just from like a 30-second skim of the docs earlier. Okay, so let's keep going here. Declarative rendering. Okay, so let's start here. At the core of Vue.js is a system that enables us to declaratively render data to the DOM using straightforward template syntax. So let's see. I'm guessing this boilerplate is probably already in my app.view. Sort of. Let's take a look at main.ts. So this is our main TypeScript file. And all it does is basically create a new object of view, router, store, render, parameters passed to the view object, and then it mounts it. Okay, so that's the selector. Okay. Oh, very cool. So that's you create the object, and then after you create it, you mount it to the div or whatever the element is, whether it's a div. So in our index.html, we should see, yeah, div id equals app. Okay, so that makes it pretty easy to drop in. Router. Okay. So this is what a view looks like. And so as opposed to Angular, where you actually get a separate file for your HTML and a separate file for your CSS and a separate file for your script. That's more akin to like the Ruby on Rails or Cake PHP, like the MVC, where you've actually got a file for your view, a file for your model, and then I guess your style file. So in this one, they're all in one file, and you just wrap them. So you got your style box, your style block, your template block, and I'm pretty sure you also add a script block. But maybe I'm wrong there. So let's keep going and see. So yeah, here we go. Var app equals new view. Oh, so they do it a little differently. Yeah, v2. This is the same version. L and data. Is that actually what it says? I guess their app is a little different. Their Hello World is built slightly differently. So interesting. Let me see something here. Try this lesson on Scrimba. Interesting. Let's try out Scrimba. I've never heard of this one. There's so many online code tools now, I can't even keep up. I've never really tried any of them. But I will mention that REPL.it, this is one that has actually some really cool features. And you can even do graphical things. You can even run GUI applications and like Pygame and stuff. And they had a game jam. What? Now what happened to their... Oh yeah, there it is. Game jam. They have a game jam going on, and you can win a Bitcoin. And they have a bunch of tutorials on how to... Yeah, so look, they've got all these tutorials on how to write a game on their platform. Like this is their online code editor, Python 3 with Pygame, and you run it, and you should see your output after it does everything. And so you can actually run stuff that needs GUI and screens and graphics and stuff. And you can write a whole game just in your REPL.it, and they're having a game jam. And you can do Phaser.js, Java Swing, Tkinter, Pygame, there's all kinds of stuff. Anyway, check that out if you're interested in doing a game jam. Okay, so here we go. We've got our index.html. Oh, and look at that. That's funny. In this case, they did put the Vue.js script inside the head. So, And then index.js is at the bottom. Okay, so you just got your app here, and then we're putting out a variable. Well, let me make this bigger. There we go. Oh, okay, now go away, big play button. I don't, is it trying to play a video for me?
Here we have setup for our app.
Oh, this is a go away, I don't want you to play a video, I just wanted to run it. Now can I open in browser and enter playground mode? Click play to resume watching. Actually, that's pretty neat. So you're like watching a tutorial, but you can pause it and hack away on the code and then go back to the video? That's really neat. Sorry, oops, I didn't mean to get out of there. I wanted to actually run it. Okay. Now how... Oh, I guess this is the browser right here. I was like, how do I run it? It is running. This is it right here. So, right? Hi, yes. Yeah, okay. And then our index app equals view. So they're not doing the mount. They're not doing that $ mount step. I guess that's because you're passing it in right there. So I wonder if I go back in here and if I do that, then can I skip that mount step? Var app equals new. Or are they doing that behind the scenes somewhere after they build it that I'm not seeing? Yarn serve. Index.html. There's nothing. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And CSS too. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand really clearly this connection on how it actually like bootstraps and connects and gets started. Warning. Oh, those are just warnings. Warning, warning, warning. There we go. Let's load it up. Okay, so that did work. So that did work if we just provide the element that we want to mount instead of calling mount. So that's interesting, but then it complains about having an unused variable, so this is fine, and that's what they generated. So maybe there's an efficiency reason they do it that way. Not sure, but I'll leave it the way it was. I just wanted to see if it still worked that way and make sure I understood. So back in the what they had here, so got it. Okay, let's move on then. In addition to text interpolation, we can bind element attributes like this. vbind. Let's try making a div, just like they did. So yeah, you know, I'm not sure if I am a fan of having all of the stuff in one file. I wonder if you can split it up into separate files if you want to. But, you know, as they get bigger, I would almost rather swap between a CSS file and HTML file than have to constantly scroll to the top and scroll to the bottom. That could actually be more detrimental, but we'll see. I mean, that's just me. Okay, so inside, let's leave the router links and stuff. Oh no, what happened? Oh, it doesn't. There we go. Yeah, it's a little better. Something's weird with formatting, though. Anyway, so span vbind. Okay, so you vbind, and that's how you bind something. So if we go in here. Oh, you actually create essentially a new object for each component? Is that how it works? Or is this just a totally separate example? You would normally only have one app, right? You'd have one main app that does all of the things. You wouldn't have multiple. No, I guess. So you would, wouldn't you? If you're binding one to each element, would you create one for each? I guess we'll see in an example. It'll make more sense in a second. John Kane says you would use that setup. He's talking. This is about the mount. I think he's talking about the mount stuff. You would use that setup if you want to run multiple instances of Vue in your app. Got it. And that's kind of what I was just referring to. Or where you're using the import over the CLI. You can use external CSS files. Okay, cool. Now, one more question, John. Maybe you know. In Angular, the CSS files are limited in scope to the component. Is that the same? So, like you can just be like li, style the li without being like li.mywidget under my class. Okay, so let's see if we can. Now, where was the actual data binding happening? So you use vbind to bind it. Hover your mouse over me to see my dynamically bound title. Oh, I see. Well, I guess what I'm not understanding is how does the mouse over... I guess it's binding, it knows to watch, it knows automatically to watch the date and that it changes. It's interesting, there's a little bit of magic going on there. Here we are encountering something new. The vbind attribute you are seeing is called a directive. Directive prefixed with the v dash indicate they are Vue related. Here it's basically saying keep this element's title up to date with the message property. Yeah, okay, conditionals and loops. You can do scoped CSS, John says, within the single files by adding scoped to the style tag in the file. Okay, so it's an opt-in option. Got it. Okay, so conditionals and loops, let's try that one out on Scrimba. So I want to get rid of, how do I just get rid of that play button? Go away play button. There we go. Okay, now go away messages. Okay. So what's going on here? There's some data, nothing really different there, there's just a bool. And then, okay, so index.js must flip that variable somewhere. No, data equals scene. Oh, that's just a conditional. It doesn't change. It's just giving an example of a conditional. Okay. And then there's a for loop, for to do and to do's. Okay, this is like nothing special there. If you've learned React and or Angular, that's going to be pretty intuitive. So I'm not gonna mess around with those. Okay, so here's another one. Handling user input. To let users interact with your app, we use the v on, so that if you have like an on click or an on key press. Okay, so here's the variable being output, and there's a button that you... Okay, so in Angular, that's the equivalent of doing something like click and then giving it the function. So it's just v on click equals reverse message, and so you're just passing it the function name that you want it to call. Okay. And then, oh, I see. So in your JavaScript file, you say methods, and then you define your method there. So you don't have to say this dot reverse message. You just say reverse message, and it knows because it's a local property. I wonder if you could. Wait, yeah, let's try this one out. So I want to test something out real quick. So if I go into the index.js, oh no, I wanted it here. Okay, so this works now. Can I switch this to this dot reverse message? Yeah, it still works. Now, if I give it the parentheses, I expect it not to work. Yeah, that shouldn't work. Type error, this is not a function. Yeah, because it's actually putting in the return value in there. Yeah, we want a reference to the function, which is why you don't use the parentheses. But yeah, this. So you could probably call like some other class's function in there too if you wanted to, as long as you have the right references. Okay, so let's go back. John says you also have to add a colon key with the for loop or it will complain. Hold on, let's go back up to the for loop. You're saying, so down here where it says v on, it's got v on colon click. Hold on, let's check out the v4 directive view. Let's check out the page on that real quick. So, see, they don't have anything about a key. They don't have anything about a colon key in the for loop, so... Let me search for key. Here we go, key. When Vue is updating a list of elements rendered by v4, by default it uses in-place patch strategy. If the order of the data items has changed, instead of moving the DOM elements to match the order of items, Vue will patch each element in place and make sure it reflects what should be rendered at that particular index. This is similar to the behavior of track by index in Vue 1. This default mode is efficient, but only suitable when your list render output does not rely on child component states or temporary DOM states. I see, so here's the key example. To give Vue a hint so that it can track each node's identity and thus reuse and reorder existing elements, you need to provide a unique key attribute for each item. Got it. So if you don't provide the key, then it's going to be more efficient and it's just going to like swap out display items instead of actually tracking everything and actually reordering elements in the node. But if that's important, then you add the key. Okay, good tip. Thanks, John. Array change detection mutation methods. Vue wraps and observed arrays mutation methods, like push, pop, shift, unshift. Okay, so anytime you modify the array, it's going to know. Okay, that makes sense. So if we've got a list, we've got an unordered list, a UL with a bunch of LIs in it, then depending on how important the ordering and keeping track of it is, we might need the key option. Okay. So let's keep going. Handling user input. Yeah, on click, straightforward enough. That was easy. Okay, so vModel. Oh, that's something different. Vue also provides the vModel directive that makes two-way binding between form input and app. I see. I guess that's where I was a little confused, because when it talked about binding to the date object, I thought they were kind of talking about two-way binding, but I guess because that was a function, it's a little different, and this is actually data. Okay, so if we want to do two-way binding, we say vModel equals message, and then that is the variable. Can I try that one on Scrimba? Does it have both of them? vModel equals message. Let's see, so they have... We've got... message is there. Oops, I wanted to go back here. So we have data is there, but back in our index, so instead of saying... so many big pop-ups, go away. Instead of saying on click do that, we'll say input vModel equals message, and then when we change this one, it should also change. Okay, cool. Okay, so all you have to do is, you don't have to create a model or anything special. You just say vModel, and that just corresponds with, well, I suppose it doesn't have to be just a straight variable. It could probably be an object with more data inside it. Composing with components. You know, this Scrimba thing is really cool. I really like this idea of the video tutorial being interactive and being able to pause it and actually see the code and play with it. I'm gonna have to bookmark this page. Scrimba is a powerful new way of learning code. Play around with the instructor's code at any time right in the player. It looks like it's heavily JavaScript based because, yeah, it's all Java. Oh, yes, CSS. It's all... Oh yeah, I do want to learn D3.js. How nice. So it's understandable why it's so heavily JavaScript based, because the player and the Scrimba thing is all needs JavaScript to work. So that let's see, at the bottom it says Scrimba's in beta. This is actually really cool though. Anyway, let's see, 51 minutes. I'm feeling relatively comfortable with it so far. I have a much better understanding at like a high level of how it all fits together and how it kind of compares. But yeah, so we're almost done with this, and so let's go back to the agenda. What I did want to check out, and we're reviewing the documentation now that we're finishing. So I did want to check out the routing and the state management, and the nice thing is that it's actually already set up here. So if you've used React or Angular, it's going to be relatively the same, right? So you set up all your routes, and then in your file you should have, oh no, it's going to be in my Vue component, router links. Boom, there it is. So in Angular it would be a router link equals that, and in this case it looks like they have a special element themselves called router link. And here it is, router view, and the Angular equivalent would be like a router outlet, I think. But in this case, they just have router view. It's a single element. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. I wonder about active link. Well, hold on, we'll come back to that. We'll say, what about active link? Does it do it automatically? It shouldn't. I kind of hope it wouldn't. So, oh wait, is it? Look, about. Oh, it does. So hold on a second. Inspect element. It does. Class router link exact active router link active. Okay, so it automatically adds a router link active. I'm sure you could override it and change it if you wanted, but typically all you need is that class, so that's cool. You can just go ahead and style it without having to do any extra work. In Angular, you actually have to say router active equals active on each link and tell it like, yep, if you're active, I want you to do that. So it's nice that by default it kind of does that, because you're almost always going to want an active state on a nav link. And if not, you just won't style it. It doesn't hurt to have it. Anyway, cool. Happy with that. Like that. So where were we here? Okay, composing with components. Okay. Component system is another important concept because it's an abstraction that allows us to build large-scale applications. It's essentially a Vue instance with predefined options. Registering a component in Vue is straightforward. Vue.component, and then you give it a name, and then you pass it all the info. Okay, in this case we're saying template, and I suppose you could pass it a file instead. You could get the contents from a file if it was necessary. Now you can compose it in another component's template. Yeah. To do item. I see, so then you name it after that. You got a match there. But this would render the same text for every to-do, so we need to pass it some variables. We need to pass it some arguments. Like React, they call them props, which I'm assuming is short for properties. Properties, the variables that it has are its properties. And in this case, okay, so we've got the component to do, and it's got a props called to do. So I'm not quite sure. Does that mean it has a variable name to do, just like one variable name to do, as opposed to like a to do double square bracket, like an array of to dos? Oh, John is saying you can use objects with it too. Okay, good. So I think he's referring to, there is some lag between the stream and everything, so he was probably talking about the... Where was I when I was looking at it? I can't even remember, it's been too long now. I missed his... what else was there? You can also style the router link with the tag directive and render it however you want. You can yeah, I figured they would provide some method for overriding the class there. But it's got a sane default. It's a pretty sane default. I like it. Okay, I scrolled up too far. So yeah, we've got the to-do item. Okay, we've got a to-do item. So we've got a custom component that we're tagging on the v4, which we already saw. And then we are doing a vbind. We're binding the to-do to the item. Hold on a second. So we're binding the key. I see. So this vbind is associated with this property up here. So we created a property called to-do, and then this is where we say, hey, bind this property to this variable. Got it. So we can specify which... Okay, so that's what the bind does. You bind the property to... Yeah, now we provide each to-do item. Yeah, okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so you create components. In a large application, it is necessary to divide the whole app into components to make development manageable. We will talk a lot more about components later in the guide, but here's an imaginary example of what an app's template might look like. Okay, so you've got a main app, and then you've got, yeah, a nav at the top, and then a main view that has a sidebar and a main content. Yeah, that looks about normal. And, you know, maybe there's a footer at the bottom. Relation to custom elements. You may have noticed that Vue components are very similar to custom elements. Yes, they are. They look very similar. That's because Vue component syntax is loosely modeled after the web component spec. For example, Vue components implement the slot API and the is special attribute. Yeah, okay, I want to skip past some of that. Ready for more? We briefly introduced the most basic features. The rest of the guide will cover the more advanced features. The Vue instance. So let's see here. If we look on the left-hand side, we've got the table of contents for the whole documentation. So we went through the introduction and we went through all of these things. Okay, so we went through the whole introduction. So we've learned all of the main concepts that they consider to be the fundamental core aspects of Vue. And if you've worked with React or Angular, even just a little bit, I'm no veteran by any stretch. The first time I used React was in the stream a couple weeks ago when I learned React from scratch. The first time I used Angular was like a couple days later when I learned Angular from scratch. So I've done front-end development, I've done a lot of back-end development, but these front-end frameworks are pretty new to me, and after my couple days with React and Angular, this Vue seems very intuitive, and it looks like I'd be able to pick it up really quickly. So what else is there? The Vue instance, and then there's template syntax, computed properties, class and style bindings, conditional rendering, list rendering, event handling, form inputs, and component basics. So the only other one I'm probably interested in is the component basics. Components in depth. In that section, they've got component registration, props, custom events, slots, transitions and animations. Okay, I wasn't expecting them to have that in there. Reusability, JSX, no thank you. Tooling, single file components, scaling up. Oh yeah, so single file components are nice when you have small components. I could see that being kind of nice. And you know, I suppose you could do it in Angular too. There's no reason you couldn't put it all in one file. It's just that the generator, the code generator that does it for you, splits them out automatically. So I guess that's not really a really valuable differentiator. Okay, so routing, the official router. And luckily we don't have to learn much about it because it provided it out of the box, so you know, I can probably just hack away and be like, okay, hey, I need to add a new route. Okay, well let's just copy and paste one. Now let's call this one the dashboard. And then we'll link it to the dashboard component. Oh, but there is no dashboard component, so we will have to create a new one. And in this case, nice, so there's the extra views. I missed all these pieces of code here. So we've got the hello world.view. Oh, there we go. Now it's making more sense. So we've got our router view, and that's where it's going to output the router link, and I guess by default it's on home. So this is the page that it's outputting by default. And then if you click on about, you've got this other one. Now where's hello world? Oh, there it is. So on the home page, that's where the hello world component goes. And because we're in WebStorm, I should be able to hold control. Yeah, and I hold control and mouse over, and it tells me it's coming from hello world.view, and I can even click right into it, and it brings me right to the file where it's defined hello world.view. And in this case, why don't we just clean it up a little bit and just bask in the glory that it's... Oh, I guess I'm gonna have to yarn serve it again. Oh, I didn't create the dashboard. So yeah, I wanted to see, so with the Vue CLI, I should be able to hopefully generate a new component. Or will I have to do that by hand? I mean, they look simple enough, right? Interesting, okay, because let's see. What? I guess I did it from here. View, create build, init. I guess I do just have to start my own file, but they're so simple, right? Like, let's build one from scratch. Oh, look, I can use WebStorm and say new view component. We'll call this one dashboard. And boom, there we go. Yeah, so we got just the empty template, the script, and the style. Okay, and it even, in my case, it defines scoped. And here, good. So export default, name dashboard, and we'll do like, welcome to the dashboard. And since we added a route to it, if we go back into hello world and we say yarn start or yarn serve, in a second it should load up, unless we broke it. Error. Okay, router could not find. Oh, I need to import it in the router. So now that I actually have it created, I should be able to do Alt Enter. Oh no, it can't. It doesn't recognize. Normally when you do Alt Enter, it helps you find the import. So I'm going to need to import dashboard from views/dashboard.view. And then it should find it and it should run okay. And I'm going to have to actually go up to my main app in the router here and duplicate, and then add a link to the dashboard. And then now we can see, awesome, now we've added a new page. So, you know, we really didn't have to go out of our way to learn how to use the router and how to set it up, because it set it up and wired it all up for us. And now we can just modify and figure out, you know, oh, if there's some kind of special, later on, if we need to accept a variable or whatever, maybe it's, you know, something like that. We'll have to look up the documentation then, but John says you have to manually create your components, but not with WebStorm. You saw how easy it was. Look at that, and look at all the boilerplate it saved me. I suppose you could do that with any editor. You just save a snippet. But yeah, they're easy enough, and I suppose you don't even need the style, and technically you probably don't even need the script if you don't have one. But yeah, you just gotta remember, okay, export default, and then the name. And then I guess you put everything else in there too. Oh, so look at this. Oh, that's right, because we're using TypeScript, so in this case, I'd have to include all this other boilerplate, I guess. I mean, I guess I didn't have to, technically, because it still compiled and worked as it was. But, yeah, I'd probably just copy and paste that into a new one. Okay, so where were we? Let's see. So routing. Okay, yeah, even their whole section on the routing is really tiny. State management, okay. Large applications can often grow in complexity. Information for React developers. If you're coming from React, you may be wondering how Vuex compares to Redux, the most popular Flux implementation. Redux is actually Vue layer agnostic, so it can be used with Vue via some simple bindings. Vuex is different in that it knows it's in a Vue app. This allows it to better integrate with Vue, offering a more intuitive API and improved development experience. Simple state management from scratch. Okay, let's see. We're at an hour and 8 minutes. Let's see what we're like on the agenda. I might take a 5-minute break here. So I'm gonna say routing is okay, and let's see. No, I'll just go through this. So actually, before I get into the Vue stuff, I actually want to check out. I'm not gonna implement them, but I just want to see what's out there as far as Material and Bootstrap themes. I like Bootstrap and I have a lot of experience with it, but Material is like the nice new design, and I like the way Material looks, so I was just curious if they have maybe some pre-built packages. Now I did hear Vuetify. Okay, so they've got one called Vuetify, a material design component framework. So they've probably got a whole set of components that you can use. So let's see what they've got. Here we go, UI components. Alerts. I just want to kind of see how they look. And maybe they have a little code example. Yeah, so Material is how Google does a lot of their stuff. I think, is Google the one that actually formally put out the material design specs? I'm pretty sure they are. Icons, yeah, these look very Google. I watched a whole video once about how they made material design. And they actually like cut out construction paper and laid it out, and they literally used physical construction paper material to do the design and make it like look like that. It was interesting. Bottom now, okay. Sheets, breadcrumbs, buttons, floating action buttons, the fabs. Yeah, you see those a lot in Android apps. Fabs. Calendar. Calendar looks decent. And so, template. Cards. Yeah, so, you know, all the stuff you'd expect. I guess we could just call it a full-featured one. They've got all the components you'd expect. Now, how about Bootstrap? They have one in Bootstrap as well. Okay, so it looks like they do have really solid component libraries for both Bootstrap and Material. John says you can add them to your project with just Vue add your package. Yeah, okay, so... Or you could do yarn add Vue, Bootstrap, Vue, Bootstrap. Over here they say install the CLI and then yeah, Vue add Vuetify. Let's try it out. Oh, I guess it's /node modules Vue add Vuetify. I'm wondering if it'll actually change my out-of-the-box app that I already have. Like, is it suddenly going to inject some global styles? I don't think it will. I think it's simply going to make those components available to me if I want to use them. And I don't even think it's gonna like turn it on by default. So I'm expecting to see no difference in my app at this point just from installing that. It's so funny we have to wait on JavaScript compilers. Oh, it did. It actually replaced my whole homepage and everything. Vuetify material design. Explore components. Select a layout. Oh, it's got some pre-made layouts. Interesting. I'll have to play with that. That looks pretty promising. Cool. Well, it's good to know that those are available. Let's say, okay, yeah, check. It's state management. So I just want to, let's read through the state management thing and see. Simple state management from scratch. I think I'm going to read through this and then probably call it a night, because those are all the important things that I wanted to get through, is get a feel for all of these things, and the state management was the last one. In Angular, they have dependency injection. So anytime you want to share state between components, you just tell your component, hey, I need this dependency. And in that case, you could just say, like, I have a global dependency called my global state. And then any component that needs to access that global state, in your component, you just say, hey, I have a dependency on the global state object. And it'll automatically get access to it. But let's see how they do it. And in React, there is no state management. You have to use something like Redux or MobX or something else. And I didn't want to start getting into comparisons of all of those. So simple state management. It is often overlooked that the source of truth in Vue applications is the raw data object. A Vue instance only proxies access to it. Okay, and the data object that it's talking about is actually, so if we go into our main app.vue, no, the main.ts. No, there's no data in there. I guess it's in the actual components. Maybe not. I could have swore there was a data variable. I guess that's this one. The store. Hold on, let's see. So they've got all these different constructors. Anyway, well, the data gets passed into the app when it gets started up. I think that's what the store was. So, const source of truth, yeah, it's a global object. Then you've got one Vue app that has access to the data, and then you've got another Vue thing with another copy. Now, whenever source of truth is mutated, both of them will update their views automatically. Subcomponents within these instances would also have access to it. We have a single source of truth now, but debugging may be a nightmare. Any piece of code could change the state, and we wouldn't know where it came from or which component changed it. To help solve this problem, we can adopt a store pattern. And so, in this case, instead of just having just like a JSON object or something, we've got a special object we're creating. It's got a debug option, it's got a state that actually has all of the variables, and then it's got basically some getter and setter functions to operate on it, essentially. So, notice all actions that mutate the store are put inside the store itself. This type of centralized state management makes it easier to understand what types of mutations could happen and how they're triggered. Actually, that's a really good point. And I think that's a good idea, because otherwise you've got like your user component that has create user, set user, and then you've got like your user profile component that might do something to the user where you change your username or something, and then you're like, oh, where is that function that changes the user and this and that? So yeah, having anything that can potentially modify the global state all in one place, I can see that being good, but I can also see it getting cluttered. I can also see it having too many things in it if it has to be all in one place. Now when something goes wrong, we'll have a log of what happened, okay, just because they're actually printing the logs. In addition, each instance and component can still manage its own state in a private state and have a shared state, okay. So the store manages the shared state, and anytime there's a trigger, it tells everybody who's watching it. It's important to note that you should never replace the original state object in your actions. The components and the store need a shared reference to the same object in order for the mutations to be observed. So if you completely replaced it, you'd be replacing the pointers to the objects, which would break all of the references. So you always want to mutate the existing object. As we continue developing the convention where components are never allowed to directly mutate the state, but should instead dispatch events to the store and ask the store to modify the state, we eventually arrive at the Flux architecture. The benefit of this convention is we can record all state mutations and implement advanced debugging helpers such as mutation logs, snapshots, and even history rerolls. Yeah, this brings us full circle back to Vuex. If you've read this far, it's probably time to try it out. Oh, I see. So this whole section was basically saying this is how you would do it if you were going to build it from scratch. And this is like, I understand. So this was not explaining how Vuex works. This was explaining how you could store state yourself, but you should actually use this Vuex library because we've kind of worked all that out for you already. And this isn't official. This is a Vue.js project under that umbrella. So I imagine it would be in sync and compatible always with the latest Vue.js. So that'll give you a little confidence there that those two will work together. John says you can break out your mutations, actions, and everything into modules and just import them. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Backend API. Okay, let's skip over that. What is Vuex? Full documentation. Example. So we actually have it set up in our project already, because the boilerplate generator that I used actually included it already, the Vue CLI. So yeah, the store is right there, and the store is being imported from store.ts. And it's basically creating the same kind of object that we just looked at, but it's actually creating the Vuex store class object. And that formally has state, mutations, and actions. And this is one where, unlike the router, where I can just start hacking away on the router and kind of figure my way and fumble my way through it, this store is going to be a little different. I've never worked with a state manager like Flux or Redux or MobX or Vuex or anything like that, so I'd have to get a little more familiar with these terminologies. But again, I think this is the data, this is the history, and these are the methods that allow you to perform mutations on the state. So that actually sounds pretty straightforward. I'm not sure what you put in the mutations though. So, like, what are the difference between the actions and the mutations then? What is Vuex? Vuex is a state management pattern and library. It also integrates with the official dev tool. Oh, yeah, that's something I didn't check out. Let's check out the dev tools. I forgot that they have a Vue. Here we go. Get the Firefox add-on. Get the standalone Electron app. Let's try this out. You know, speaking of design pattern or design style guides, like we were looking at Bootstrap and Material Theme, Firefox actually has their own theme, or not theme, but like design guide. And so Firefox provides this design system in order to help you make apps and extensions that kind of fit in and look native with Firefox apps and Mozilla and Firebird and Thunderbird and all those. And as someone who's not a designer, I found that the design guide was actually really well written, and I liked color. Yeah, you can tell, like, you see the Firefox colors and stuff, and they give you some palettes to work with, and so it's actually kind of a nice little design framework to work in. I like it. Anyway, I wanted to add my plugin, and I think I did. I think I did add the plugin, but where did it go? Testing as Firefox add-on. No, hold on. Yeah, oh, there it is. Vue.js not detected, so let's go back to my page. Hello world. Yeah, so now it detects, and this augury one is the Angular one. So now we've got the Vue dev tools, Vue.js, yeah, open dev tools. Okay, we'll Control-Shift-I and go over to this Vue tab. And sure enough, just like the React and the Angular ones, it actually understands the Vue DOM. The Vue DOM with their specific element types. And you've even got access to all the data and the routes and all that good stuff. Cool. Oh, and there's other tabs. Okay, so that was just the components tab. And then you've got the Vuex, and you can actually see the mutations and the state. And look, you can even time travel in the state here. Okay, and events and refresh. Very cool. So, nice tool chain. Nice tool chain so far. So where were we? What is Vuex? What is a state management pattern? Let's start with the simple view counter app. Okay, so there's the data, return count. Our view is just a div with a counter, and we only have one method called count. Okay, so all of the state right now in this one is being contained within the little component here. Yeah, it is a self-contained app, but now we want to, I guess we want to break out the state. Getting started. The simplest store. Hold on. Getting started. At the center of every Vuex application is the store. A store is basically a container that holds your state. They're reactive. You cannot directly mutate the store. You have the simplest store. Okay. Store equals new Vuex store. State mutations. Okay, so this is what it already created for us, is the basic one. So mutations is where you actually put the methods. So I guess I'm confused then what the actions are. If the mutations are the methods that mutate the state, then what are the actions? State, single state tree. Getting Vuex state in Vuex components. Yeah, so how do I access it? So how do we display state inside of our components? You retrieve it. How do you retrieve it? Oh. I see. I guess store is just kind of available. Let's see. So I wonder if I have to import store. No? And see if I, just to make sure it does understand the reference, I can hold control. And over here, yeah, it knows that it's a reference to store in the main.ts. Okay, so that's cool. I don't have to be like, hey, yeah, by the way, import store on every template. Okay, cool. So basically, boom, that's how you access it. You just store dot whatever you need. Vuex provides a mechanism to inject the store into all child components with the store option enabled by, yeah, so that's already turned on due to my boilerplate code generator. Store, yeah, that's what it did already. Okay, by providing the store map state helper. So John says, mutations are what actually change the state, and you use actions to call the mutations. Oh, okay. So mutations are kind of like an in-between layer. No, so that makes sense. Okay, so then in that case, the mutations are essentially like your private functions to modify the state, and then your actions are essentially your public-facing ones. Functions for components. So as of now, that's somewhat my understanding, but we'll see how this goes. The map state helper, when a component needs to make use of multiple store state properties and getters, declaring all of these would get repetitive. To deal with that, we can use map state, which helps generate getters and setters for us. Interesting. Computed map state. I'll have to come back to that one. I'm not really sure. We can also pass a string array to map state. Yeah, I think I'll probably have to review that. It seems a little more convoluted. Object spread operator. Yeah, I'm going to skip past that too. Components can still have local state. Using Vuex doesn't mean you should put all the state in Vuex. Only things that need to be really global. Although putting more state into Vuex makes your state mutations more explicit and debuggable, sometimes it could also make your code more verbose and indirect. if a piece of state strictly belongs to a single component, it could and should just be left in there. Yeah, so that makes sense. Put only in the global state what you really need to be there. Getters. Oh, so there's actually a section called getters. Oh, so I guess actions are specifically for changing, and getters... I was using the term getters and setters in a general sense. I didn't realize that getters was actually a thing. So, yeah. It expects it. Getters. Wait, what is it complaining about here? Okay, and then this is going to be, I guess, read-only methods for public-facing. I guess we should say methods, technically. Public-facing methods to mutate state. Protected data. And so the state is more like a protected data structure where people can read it, but they can't write it. Mutations, they never call directly. Actions are the ones that they call publicly to modify, and getters are strictly for reading, which will not end up actually creating a log of mutations. Method style access, you can also pass arguments to getters. Okay, math getters. Okay, I see. So if you have a whole bunch of getters, then this would save you some time. And I guess that's the same reason you would want to use whatever we saw, the map state, same kind of reason. Okay, so that it's starting to make a lot more sense, and that's actually very simple once you get down to it. Once you understand the terminology and like the purpose of each one of these, now I feel ready to use it. I feel like, okay, now I can just start dropping in like user is logged in. I guess it would be something like that. There we go. And so bam, now I just created a user is logged in. A mutation would be something like change user logged in state, and that would do something. And then this one would be like the method would be like logout user, although this some of these might be better off in like a user specific one. Like logout user might be better for actually anyway, yeah, so stuff like that, you know, log out the user, and then the getter would be like is user logged in. So then your components can call, hey, is the user logged in? I need to know about the user state. And if they want to change something, then it's, you know, log out the user please, which would call the mutation, which would change the state. So, okay. Awesome. So, yeah, let's skim through this. The only way to actually change state in Vuex is by committing a mutation. Each mutation has a string type and handler. Okay, so you just call it store dot the function name, no problem. Oh no, wait, this is not how you call it. You have to call commit, and then you pass it the name of the mutation. You cannot directly call the mutation handler. Think of it more like an event registration. So I'm saying, hey, well, interesting. So I am calling... Oh no, so I must be calling store.commit from within my action? Is that right? So I wouldn't want to call store commit directly from my component, right? Because you're not supposed to call the mutations directly from your component. You should be calling store.commit from your action and then exposing that through an action. Commit with payload. Commit. Okay, so the name and then any variables that go with it afterwards. Okay. Object style commit. Okay. If you have a whole bunch of variables, that might be a little better. Okay. Mutations follow Vue's reactivity rules. Using constants for mutation types. It is a commonly seen pattern to use constants for mutation types in various Flux implementations. This allows the code to take advantage of tooling like linters, and putting all constants in a single file allows your collaborators to get an at-a-glance view of what mutations are possible in the entire application. Interesting. I suppose that could be good if you had a lot of them there, but whether to use constants is largely a preference. Yeah, I would lean away from it unless you really had a lot of them. A lot, like over 50. Well, like a lot. Because then you'd have a lot of stuff to scroll through, and I could see having one place to break it out too could be better. Mutations must be synchronous. One important rule to remember is that mutation handlers must be synchronous. Well, I guess that's, I mean, to avoid race conditions. That's why. Committing mutations in components. Yeah, okay. You can commit mutations in components with this store commit. Interesting. So if you can call commits directly, okay, onto actions. So it says you can, it doesn't say you should, it says you can commit mutations with components. Or use the map mutations helper, which maps component methods onto actions. Asynchronicity combined with state mutation can make your program very hard to reason about. Oh, so that's starting to make sense. You need the actions because those other things are synchronous and they may take time. So the actions add the asynchronous layer on top of it. Is that what they do? Asynchronicity combined with state mutation can make, yeah. For example, when you call two methods, both with async callbacks that mutate the state, how do you know which one executed first? This is exactly why we want to separate the two concepts. In Vuex, mutations are synchronous. To handle this, we introduce actions. Alright. You can do it. You can do it. Yep, you can do it. You can load the actions page. Do you think it's actually going to load when it finishes? Is the actions page really that big? Is it like a gigabyte? Oh no. It failed. Let's open it in a new tab. Done. Actions are similar to mutations. The big difference is that instead of mutating the state, actions perform the commits. Actions can contain arbitrary synchronous operations. Let's register a simple action. Okay, increment. Action handlers receive a context object which exposes the same set of methods and properties on the store instance. So you can call context.commit. Okay. So how do we, yeah, dispatch. Okay, so instead of calling store.commit and the name of the mutation, we say store.dispatch and then the name of the action. So it's basically like saying, hey store, call this action for me. This may look dumb at first sight. No, I understand why they're doing it. So, okay. Now, how do we actually? Yeah, how do we deal with is there a return value, or do we get like a notification that it worked and when it's done? So dispatching, okay. Dispatch. Oh, no, there's the variable. Dispatch, okay, now how about like a callback when it's done? A more practical example of a real-world action. Yeah, so there's the action. Dispatching actions in components. You can dispatch actions in components with this store dispatch, or use map actions. Okay, composing actions. I want to see... So... Ah, there it is. That's it. Now you can do this dispatch and then. So that's how you get your callback to take action whenever it's finally done. Got it. Also in another action, so okay, you can dispatch one action from another action and wait for it. Okay, good to know. Finally, if we make use of async await, we can compose our actions like this. Actions, async, async. Okay, so if you have an async one, and then you call await, assuming they return promises, await, dispatch. So I'm more used, and I'm not a huge JavaScript person, so I'm more used to seeing callbacks being passed as parameters or tacked on with the dot notation. I'm not used to seeing like the async with an await being passed as a parameter. I'm not used to that syntax of it. Is there actually any benefit to doing the async await versus this? Is it totally syntactic, or is there some difference under the hood? It's possible for store.dispatch to trigger multiple yeah, that's fine. Modules. Okay, so there's one last piece to this Vuex. Due to a single state tree, all of our state is contained inside one big object. Okay. Okay, good. So you can basically break up your store into sub-stores. Got it. Cool. That's going to be helpful for refactoring large things down the line, or just planning out architecture ahead of time. Module local state. Okay, so each module can have their own state, which I guess I expected them to have. But okay, that's good to know you can do that too. So what else? Application structure. Vuex doesn't really restrict how you structure your code. Yeah, luckily that boilerplate generator was pretty nice. It did all the stuff for you. It gets the router and the store ready. It gives you a couple components out of the box, so it puts you in a nice place to start building. And so yeah, if you want to distribute it, you've got your single page application all in the dist folder. Very simple dist with your JS, CSS, and it looks like it's all... Well, it minified them, but it didn't concatenate all of them. I wonder if there's any reason for that. Not a big deal. Not really a big deal at all, but you'd think if they're going through all the trouble of minifying all of it and doing all that, they might as well concatenate them too. But that's probably just something you do in Webpack yourself. Oh, thanks, John. John says it's all sugar. Talking about the async and await syntax versus doing the dot then. I'd probably do the dot then just because at my level that seems more intuitive and what I'm familiar with at least. So this was very eye-opening. We'll say check. So I'm at a point where I think if I wanted to start working with Vue on an app, I'm ready to get started. I understand all the concepts. I have a pretty good grasp. Of course, I'd have to refer to the documentation regularly, but I've got enough of an understanding to get going. So I hope you guys did too. Where are we at? An hour and 46 minutes? Oh, and John's also saying it didn't concat because I have some lazy loading. And so that makes sense, probably because it won't load things if it doesn't need to. So that's a good thing in that case then. So I can thank it for splitting it up, because in that case, if it doesn't need to load it, then it's not going to bother. So that's cool. I wasn't going to mess with it anyway. I do trust the way it's packing everything. I trust the way they set it up out of the box, so I'm okay with that. But yeah, let's recap. So we looked at Vue. We looked at it, how to install it. You just use the CLI. You npm install the CLI, and then you do Vue create. We looked through the documentation, went through the introduction. We checked out the routing. We looked and saw that there is a material and a Bootstrap theme available. There's a DevTools plugin. And we looked at the state management and got a pretty firm understanding of how that works. And again, just to kind of recap there, we've got the state that stores all of the data, which is like your private, protected data. Well, it's protected, not private in that case. It's actually readable directly by components, but not writable. To write it, you need a mutation, which is, I'll call it private. They should be private, essentially, but they can be called directly, but they shouldn't. So these are the things that are actually synchronous and actually mutate the data, and those are called with a commit. So it's store.commit and the name of the mutation. And that should ideally be triggered by an action, which is what your components should be calling, because the action can be used asynchronously. It should call the commits on the state and then return when it's done. And then the component should say store dispatch. Store dispatch, and then the name of the action. And then it can await and do a .then whenever the action is done. And the getters are good for read-only. Awesome. So, overall thoughts, let's see. Compared to React and Angular, what do I think? I like it more than React. I think it's a bit simpler. The whole idea with React of like sending state down and bubbling it back up with callbacks, that seemed like a whole kind of design paradigm that required a bit of getting used to. And then you had to figure out which libraries you wanted to pair with it for state management and routing and stuff. And that was kind of a turn-off because I didn't want to spend all that time. I didn't have an opinion on it. So I liked Angular because it came with all that stuff in the box, and you can be confident that all of those modules work together cohesively in the ecosystem. And if you ever need help, then people are going to be familiar with the same set of modules. Now, Vue seems simple enough. It's relatively lightweight, seems pretty easy to drop in, but it comes with just enough stuff in the box. It's got that Vuex, it's got which is the state management, and it's got the Vue router, which are like the two most essential components that you need to building the single page app. Those are the two big things that if I was building a React app, those are the things that I'd have to try and package in later myself. So if you don't need all of the other stuff that Angular comes with, Vue looks like a good choice. But I did see that Vue did have some... Vue had animations, for example. They do have support for animations, which is something Angular has too. So let's see, moving forward, if I were to do a new project, which one would I choose? I'm not sure. I think it would be a toss-up between Vue and Angular. But without using more of them, without doing more in-depth comparison between Angular and Vue, I can't really say I like one better than the other. I think I would lean slightly more towards Vue. Their syntax seems to be a little bit cleaner and more consistent, and it's not as intimidating and overwhelming. So I like it. I think I will use it, definitely. Probably in my next project I will at least give it a good shot, and then I'll probably pick between Angular and Vue and probably just stick to one moving forward. But I really wanted to give this one a fair shot, and I have to say I was very happy with it, very impressed. Documentation was good enough to get me through it, didn't really have any problems or roadblocks, and it seems very intuitive. It's something I can get used to looking at and working with. So I hope you guys learned something. John Kane, you were such a big help today, and you really gave me a lot of information. I really, really appreciate that. And this might be your first time here. Welcome. I haven't seen you chatting around before, so cool. And I'm gonna go ahead and do my plugs before I sign off. So subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and you can get the daily live streams. I've been doing the daily live streams for a while on a variety of different programming topics. And if you're not on the Dev Dungeon Discord server, go to devdungeon.com, and in the right column there's a button to join me on Discord. You can come hang out and chat with everybody and talk about programming and stuff. You can get a copy of my book, Security with Go, and you can get the code for all of the projects that we do on the streams at github.com/devdungeon. I'm not going to push up the code for this one because I really didn't do anything except tinker with the boilerplate Hello World. So it was pretty straightforward. John says, I usually lurk, but Vue is something I really love. Awesome. Well, I'm glad I did something you like. Question, have you ever used NativeScript? NativeScript, or I guess just NativeScript. I think that's the only one you can use Vue with. But they do have official Vue support, and you can use it to make native mobile apps, not like a Cordova app where you're actually running JavaScript and HTML inside of a web view in a mobile app. With NativeScript, you're actually using native list widgets, native button widgets. So it's not rendering HTML and CSS, you're actually compiling to native widgets, so the performance and the responsiveness is much better. And you get, yeah, this is actually one cool thing about it. With NativeScript, you have 100% direct access to all of the Android APIs. And unlike Cordova, where you have to write a plugin to wrap every Android API. Like, you can access anything in the Android API you want, but you have to write a plugin to wrap it and call it. But with NativeScript, you can basically, without writing a plugin, get direct access to the underlying APIs, which means even if they push out a new version on Android, on day one, those new APIs are going to be directly available without having to wait for somebody to update NativeScript core API to wrap the new API. Like, it's all directly in there, which is super cool. And to give you an example, yeah, so native access out of the box. NativeScript allows you to write native applications, native expressions directly with JavaScript and TypeScript. No time wasted writing boilerplate wrappers around native APIs. And so here's an example. You literally just call Java dot, and then the name of the Java function. You're calling the packages directly, java.time.localDateNow. So it's very cool. It's very cool that you can just go right in and call right to Java like it's nothing. And yeah, so 0-day support for native APIs. And here's an example of someone using ARKit. ARKit using NativeScript. So it's good stuff. And I was actually reading how you can actually you can use a command line tool to run. It'll update your project so that you have, like, if you had an Angular project or a Vue project, you can basically add the secondary views. So you can reuse your JavaScript files, you can reuse this and that, but you have to create the new Vue template. You have to create the new template because you don't have divs and Ps and As and Lis and ULs because it's not HTML. So you have to replace your div and your span with like a text element and a list widget. But once you replace all of the elements with the native widgets, you're good to go. Everything else is still the same. So it looks pretty cool. I did React Native a little bit, and that was pretty straightforward. I did one stream on using React Native and using it with the Django REST API. So John says, I have not used NativeScript, and you can use Vue with the latest release with Ionic. Yeah, so Ionic is a little different. Ionic is different in the fact that I'm pretty sure, yeah, cross-platform hybrid apps. So Ionic is more like Cordova, my understanding. It's rendering a web view, and that's what it's doing. So you're limited in performance because it can only run in one thread in your web view. Your responsiveness is less, your screen is laggier, and all this stuff that goes along with Cordova and web apps. That's my understanding, at least, so I may be wrong. But Ionic also costs money, whereas Cordova is open source Apache, and NativeScript is also open source. I believe it's MIT license. No, hold on a second. NativeScript license. What is the license? So if we go here, license. Oh, so it's under Apache as well. So both NativeScript and Cordova are both under Apache 2, which is a good license. It's essentially just like MIT and BSD, except it's longer and it's got more legalese. So it's like, it's better from a legal perspective. It's more explicit. I like the MIT license. I could do a whole stream about licenses, but I like Apache, that's a solid license. MIT, BSD, the ZLive, like all of those are really solid licenses. The ones where you want to be careful and think really hard about are the GPL and the lesser GPL. Because the GPL is what they call infectious. Anything that if you use GPL in your code, basically your whole code base has to go GPL. And that's what turns a lot of people off from it, and what makes a lot of big corporations basically cannot use GPL code because of that. So MIT is a little more permissive. Lesser GPL is kind of an in-between. So Qt framework, the Qt library and GUI library is an example of lesser GPL, where they have a commercial and they have a lesser GPL license. And what the lesser GPL lets you do as opposed to the regular GPL is it's not infectious, and you don't have to open source your code if you do not modify their library. So essentially with the lesser GPL, it says if you make any changes to our library, our Qt library, you do have to contribute back those changes. But if you just use our library in your commercial closed source app, you do not have to open source yours. But you are required to dynamically link to our library. So you cannot statically compile our library into it, because people need to know, for one, that it's actually using the real library, and they need to be able to swap out that library. They need to have the freedom to say, if I want to upgrade my Qt library to the next version, I should have the freedom to do that and not be locked into the version that you're using. So that's what the lesser GPL does between the GPL, and there's all kinds of little things about it, but Apache is a great license. If something has the Apache license, you can feel pretty safe and confident about using it, as long as you do give the credit and everything. You don't have to like open source all your code. So anyway, that's a little aside that's not really related to Vue, but actually I'm kind of curious now. Maybe it was Vue.js itself that had the MIT license. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so Vue has an MIT license. And I like what GitHub does here, where it says, here's the permissions you have, here's the things you can't or it doesn't come with, and here's the conditions. So they're doing a pretty good job about kind of helping you understand what your rights are. And technically, if there's no license, then it's considered the person's proprietary. And even though they may have put it up on GitHub publicly, it doesn't mean you can use it, actually. If there's no license, it means you're not allowed to use it. You have to actually get permission from the author if they don't provide explicitly an open source library. Kind of counterintuitive, like, hey, they put the code up on GitHub publicly, doesn't that mean it's open source? Not necessarily. Well, it's not. It doesn't mean that the license is one of... they're not granting you any rights with it, basically. Just because they shared it and made it public doesn't mean they're granting you rights to do anything with it. Anyway, thanks to everybody who came out. Thanks, John. I will see you guys tomorrow.